Hello everyone, welcome to what should be the final part of this real-time tutorial. Now it is worth mentioning it has been quite a few months since I filmed the last part, so bearing that in mind, apologies if I do anything in a slightly different order. For example, the first thing we're going to do is draw the brown fur on the neck here. So yeah, sorry if it's a slightly different order at all to how I did this bit. But to be honest, I think that just goes to show how flexible drawing can be. Yes, I can show you the ideal methods, the ideal way to do things, but there isn't one set way of doing things. Things can be done in slightly different orders. But saying that, hopefully it is all fairly similar to the previous parts and hopefully nothing is confusing. But as always, if you have any questions or if anything doesn't make sense, please do let me know in the comments and I will do my best to get back to you. So I'm just going to purely focus firstly on the little section of brown fur above the collar, and then we'll do the collar itself and work down from there. We're looking at the lightest colours first, so I'm going to start with the Ivory from the POLYCHROMOS range, but any creamy sort of colour will do. So I'm just going to do small circular motions, fairly gentle to begin with. And we're just focusing on getting a nice even layer of this colour and just making sure the whole section is covered really. I have already made sure any graphite pencil marks are quite faint, so I did use my kneadable eraser there just to make sure that there aren't any harsh lines coming through. Now I already have put a little bit of pencil on this bit here just to remind myself that that is going to be a dark shadow, so we won't really be needing any of the Ivory on that bit there. And I'm just making sure I go all the way down to the collar itself. There will be some shadows at some points in between the fur and the collar itself, so kind of around here, but yeah, just make sure it's all covered for now and we can build up any shadows where they're required. So that already is pretty much covered. So next we're going to go to any other pale colours that may be useful. Might go a little bit darker. I'm thinking brownish orange from the CARAN PABLOS range, but any kind of dark pinky colour, because it is quite a bit darker than the Ivory. Very gentle usage at the moment, so I'm going to work from within this deep shadow here outwards and then kind of shade in any other darker parts just so we can start getting a nice 3D effect. Obviously it's not the correct colour just yet. Here it's going to be quite a lot darker. It's going to be almost black in this bit here, but it gets those layers built up nice and early. So starting a little bit harder with the pressure and then gradually decreasing the pressure as we move away from that shadowed area. Taking it nice and easy. Don't want to go too hard too early. Keeping things nice and consistent. Okay, that's that bit there. Then you can see where I've got my graphite pencil mark here. That marks another shadow. You've almost got a fold in the fur there. So I'm going to go a little bit harder along that crease. And then gradually decrease the pressure as I move away to the right hand side. Now do just be careful because the fur kind of coming down here, you've got a few little white wispy hairs there, so I'm going to try not to get too much down there at the moment. I think in a moment I might add a layer of white pencil around there so that we can use our slice tool later to bring out those white wispy hairs. And I think this kind of pinky colour can come all the way down to the collar here. There's also another little stripe kind of coming from here So I'll just shade in a little bit on that section. Then the next deep shadow kind of comes between these two very, very faint graphite markings. I don't know if you can see those, but if you look in the reference photo, you've got this darker shadow, then another one kind of going off the other way. So again, slightly harder pressure. I still wouldn't call what I'm doing hard pressure. I'd say we're kind of heading towards medium pressure. I know that's all very subjective. It's going to be kind of down to what you think is medium. But that is why drawing is always trial and error while you're learning. It's hard to describe exactly what I'm doing. I mean, I feel like I'm describing it accurately, but what is medium to me may be like light pressure or hard pressure to you. So I've kept slightly harder pressure in here, and then as I move out of that shadowed area, gradually decreasing the pressure. I'm still keeping the motions fairly circular, as I just find that's the best way to get a nice consistent coverage. And it's also a bit shadowed up here, right under the chin. So again, a little bit harder pressure, only a little bit though, and then gradually decreasing as we move away. Lovely. So we want to be thinking about building up the right colours. It certainly needs to be looking a bit more yellowy, goldeny. But first, as I mentioned a moment ago, I just want to get some white layers down here ready for the white hairs. So I'm just going to use a bit more pressure and just colour it in a bit. Now don't be surprised if shortly when we start adding more layers it feels a bit different when going over this white layer, but it's okay. I'd rather know it's there ready so that we don't lose the opportunity to do the paler further. It's going to be a little bit over here as well, so let's get some white pencil down there, and I'm definitely doing harder pressure than I was with the previous colour. That's fine. So to start achieving some of those slightly more goldeny tones, I'm going to start using Ochre from the CARAN-PABLOS range, starting again from over here. And I'm just going to do like a nice gentle layer covering most of this area. We do need some more orange tones in there as well. But this just starts to move us in the right direction. And I'm next going to try a bit of cinnamon from the Pablos. See if that gets us towards those orangey tones a bit more. I was just looking at the list of colours I have been using in this drawing, and I was quite surprised to find, if I can find the right colour, I was quite surprised to find that I haven't used this colour at all. Considering Tess's brown fur, it's quite tan, it's quite an orangey brown. And in the past, I would always have considered using burnt ochre from the POLYCHROMOS range, yet I don't believe I have. I mean, it's not in the list unless I have used it and forgotten to write it down. So if I have already used this one, then again, apologies. I have clearly not put it down in my list. But looking at the reference photo, I feel that there's a bit more oranginess going on down here compared to around her nose, so maybe this will make an appearance. If it does, I will let you know and I'll add it to the list in this part. But yeah, just a little side note there, if you're doing kind of orangey brown fur, I would often say that burnt ochre can be quite a good one to include, but just for some reason I haven't in this one. But that is the way life goes sometimes. But anyway, back to cinnamon. Just gently applying it to the more shadowed areas. I just want to keep the highlighted bits showing through where possible. I don't want to lose the structure too early. In fact, I don't want to lose it at all. A bit more pressure again in these shadowed areas. I'm actually going to do some slightly more swoopy pencil strokes along here just to start getting the direction of the fur going. Because if you look in the reference photo where those whiter hairs are going along, it'd be good to get that texture started. And then it kind of goes the other way along this bit. Into the next shadow, a bit more pressure again. Circular motions. And then again, I'm going to do a few little swoops this way. And then it kind of curves in that direction for the rest of it. Just getting it all mapped out. There we go. It's still looking very off, but that's okay. We're still in the very early stages of this section. Right, so having to think about what colour to use next. I think let's go with burnt sienna from the POLYCHROMOS. Get those shadows even deeper. And this is going to add some more rich, reddy tones. Now let's get these shadows built up a bit more right by the ears, because you don't want to be afraid of getting right in there. Otherwise we're going to have a bit of a grainy gap between the ear and this part of the neck. So do have a little bit of an overlap. Make sure everything's got the layers in there. Using kind of medium pressure again at the moment. And gradually starting to decrease as I move away from that shadow. Again, getting a little bit of an overlap into that ear. When we start darkening these shadows, it's going to get even better because we'll use some browns, maybe a bit of black. I'm going to do a few pencil strokes again just to get the texture marked out a bit more. Just really focus on the different fur directions. That's the beauty of animals with longer fur. You've got all that to work with, a bit more variety going on. Okay, back into the next shadow. A few more swoopy pencil strokes. Watching out for the direction of the fur as we come out of this shadow. I'll just get the shadow filled in a bit more first. Then going back towards the rest of the fur. And then paying attention to how the fur kind of curves around to the right along this bit. We want a bit more shadow up right underneath the chin. Just be careful though, because it is going to start to merge a little bit. You want to be able to kind of just about differentiate between the two sections. And we've got some more shadow in this bit here. I'm actually losing track of some of the shadow down here, so I'm going to grab my dark sepia. I won't go quite as hardcore as black, but I'm just going to fill this back in a little bit, just so I remember where this shadow goes. I'd also like to start deepening shadows on other sections, such as this bit right up here, because as it stands, it's definitely not looking quite right without it being a nice deep shadow. So I'm going to go in with the dark sepia again and just make a really nice dark shadow between the ear and like her lower lip here. So small circular motions right up to the edge of the ear. As I get towards the lip, it's kind of got lots of wispy hairs. So I'm going to do that bit in a second. I'm just going to focus on the shadow right next to the ear for now. As I move away, decreasing the pressure quite rapidly. And I'm letting it kind of go between some of the hairs on the ear. All the way down until we reach the collar. There we go, that bit already is looking a bit better. However, we're now going to do focus on this shadow right by the lower lip. But in order to give the impression of the little wispy hairs, I'm going to kind of draw the spaces in between them. I'm just going to sharpen the pencil a little bit so I've got nice fine points. And I'm just flicking the pencil strokes in towards this lower lip. And as I said, that's kind of drawing the spaces between the wispy hairs. And that's one way of doing it. Another way would have been to get more pale, like light colour base layers and then use the size tool to do it. But I feel that here there's not too much to do, so just drawing in between is a little bit easier. But that's very much what you decide to do. It's down to what you prefer, really. Just saying it's one of those scenarios where there's multiple techniques you can use. There we go, that's looking nice and hairy. Just make some of the shadow a bit more solid when needed. There we go. Just deepen it up here a little bit. And again, we've got some wispy hairs here, so I'm just going to flick downwards like so, just to give a bit more texture. And pretty much just fill it in. There will be more of this down the bottom, but we'll get some more layers in there first. Right, so now we've got those dark shadows put in properly, we know where they are. We'll go back to just gradually increasing the darkness of the shades we have already. So we've kind of made it a bit more yellowy orange. We might need a bit more orange in there. So you know what? I am going to get this burnt ochre out, because that really is going to increase the orangey tone. So I'm just going to use small circular motions on some of the areas where I want it to be a bit more orange. As you can see, it's not orange. It looks orange, but if I compare it to a pencil that actually is orange, I guess that's kind of orange. In comparison, it's quite a dull browny colour, orange. But you'll find on animal fur, you're not going to want to use a proper vibrant orange anyway. That's going to be a bit much. But yeah, I'm just using I'm using quite big circular motions. Just kind of glazing over, really, just increasing those orangey tones where I see fit, really. Definitely up in here could do with some more orange. Okay, I'll do for now. I'm going to have a little blending spray now before we add more brown. So I'm going to go back in with the Ivory. And I'm going to try and keep the pencil strokes pretty much in the direction of the fur. Now, as we've probably come across previously, don't panic if the colours go a bit light and wishy-washy. We can go back over them in a bit. But we're basically just trying to get rid of the majority of the paper grain, so we don't have those little white dots coming through. There we go. So not looking particularly impressive just yet, but that is a pretty important step to do. So let's just work on reapplying any colours that we've lost there. In fact, I do want some more oranginess around here. I'm going to be mostly following the direction of the fur now, just so we can really get that texture in there. Don't go too mad with this colour, because we don't want it to look too different to the rest of her brown fur. But as I said, I just noticed it does seem to be a little bit more orange than the rest of it. But it's really going to help using those deeper reddy brown tones as well. Following the direction of the fur around here. Just keep an eye on the chin area. You don't want to be contaminating what you've already done. We will see this section separate a bit better soon once we've added some more shadow. I am going to add a bit more of this colour, brownish orange. Just do with that dark pink being a bit more prominent in some locations. And it's actually quite a good colour to use on like the more subtle shadows. I'm going to use it to blend a little bit more where the dark shadow meets the ear. And then again, it's going to do some pencil strokes going away. I'm using slightly harder pressure here, just to really get some contrast in there. But if you're unsure, keep the pressure lower and then gradually increase if you need more. Increase in this shadow here. And again, I'm going to add some more pencil strokes, curving around in this direction. Then the next shadow over here. Lovely. Next I'm going to use burnt sienna, just to add a bit more rich red tones to it. Bit unsure what bit I want to start on, so I'm going to start with the two main shadows here, then go from there. Again, just following the direction of the fur. As we've got quite a lot of layers done now, I am using quite hard pressure on these pencil strokes, because if I use gentle pressure here, you'll see it barely does anything. And it's just really important that you keep your pencils nice and sharp throughout this, because on every pencil stroke you do, you're going to get a nice crisp line. Makes all the difference. I think we could do a sum up here. I am flicking some of these pencil strokes again into the lower lip, just to get that nice wispy hair effect. Into this shadow here. We're definitely going to need some darker browns very shortly. And definitely some more shadow up here. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow tone to it. So I'm going to use Ochre from the PABLOS. Just kind of gently going over what we've done in some areas. And then we'll start increasing those shadows a bit more. As you can see, I was a very brief and gentle bit of drawing there with the ochre that I just used. I now need a brown, so we're going to use Van-dyck brown from the POLYCHROMOS. Again, we'll start from these main shadows in the middle of her neck, so we can make sure we're kind of happy with the main shaping. And again, just using individual pencil strokes, following the direction of the fur. You'll notice sometimes I kind of go from root to tip of the hair, and sometimes I go from tip to root. Just kind of depends on the positioning of the hair. And again, just darkening the shadow here a little bit. Same again over in this other shadow. And this bit kind of here is a lot darker than the rest, so I'm going to really focus on using plenty of this brown here. The next one I'm going to go back to dark sepia. Not as dark as black at the moment. Black's a bit too harsh. But I do think, especially this shadow here, just needs a bit more darkness to it. Just use it very gently. Just increasing that contrast ever so slightly. Same in there. And I'm just going to do a few pencil strokes into this bit. I just want to neaten the edges, making sure they look nice and real. So there, I'm just drawing a bit more of the spaces between the hairs. And I do want a bit more contrast between this chin here and that bit, so I think I need a bit more of the dark shadow there. Just do a pencil stroke at a time, take it easy. Just going to do some small circular motions just to make it a bit more of a soft transition. And then I am going to use, trying to decide, I'm thinking cinnamon here. Just going to do with a bit more colour on this bit here. And this is just a very minor little thing I'm doing here. You might not find you need to do anything on your bit. I'm just going to blend it a bit more with the ivory. Okay, that will do nicely. So a little bit more blending to be done in some bits. Just going to use quite hard pressure, doing a few pencil strokes in some places if I feel things need to be a bit better blended, if I've got a bit too much paper grain showing through. But I have to say the majority I think is looking pretty good. Just looking at the shadows now, I think a bit more of this one, brownish orange, a bit more pink, just to increase some of those shadows without it being too black looking. Kind of going back and forth with the pencil strokes slightly now. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. But I'm now going to use a slice tool to get some of these whiter wispy hairs through here. And then maybe a couple of other little fine details just to add some extra highlights. Right, so slice tool at the ready. I'm going to kind of hold it this way around and go in that direction. And because we did the pale, like the white pencil underneath, That should reveal itself quite easily. Just blow away any residue. If you get too much kind of pencil dust on there, just use a soft brush. It's a little bit more delicate than using your fingers. And a few this way as well. Just adds some extra texture. Just kind of go with what you feel is right on this bit. Perfect, that will do for now. So we're going to be moving down to the collar next. Now if you have a look on this section, yeah, I've got some flyaway white hairs kind of going over the collar. So for that reason, I'm going to start with this white pencil from the CARAN Luminance range. Although in fact, before I do that, just going to gently rub out some of the graphite markings because they are mostly very dark still and they don't need to be. However, don't lose it. As I always say, don't lose the pattern, especially on something as rigid as a collar. Now I kind of get mixed responses about collars. Some artists absolutely love drawing collars. I'm afraid I'm not one of those people. I will always do it, I'll always give it my best shot, but I'm certainly the sort of artist that just loves to draw fur. Something about collars for me. But you know what, we're going to embrace this collar. Doesn't look too bad actually, it's mostly the black buckle, which I think will actually be quite satisfying. So I'm just filling in the collar, I'm just kind of fully colouring it in with the white. And can you see you've got kind of some gaps? I'm just going to fill it in there as well, because then if I want to use a slice tool to add more white wispy hairs, you've got the layers underneath to reveal that. Same along here, even if it goes a little bit murky, that's fine. It's all going to be crispened up again in due course. Okay, I think that is all of the area covered that might get white hairs. A little bit here actually. Where's it gone? This bit. There we go, that's fine. So we're going to start with the blue material. I've already got light ultramarine, so use that, or sky blue, anything kind of along those lines. And I'm going to start by just colouring it in nice and gently. Bear in mind we just filled it in with the white, so it does mean it's going to take a bit more effort to actually get the blue to have a nice decent layer. The bit where it's darker at the bottom, that's where I don't have any white pencil, so you can see the difference there. But try and keep it as even as you can. I'm already having quite a tough time keeping it even because of the white hairs, but we'll do our best. And there's going to be a couple more layers anyway, and then there's going to be the white hairs going over it, so if it's not perfect, the white hairs are going to distract from it anyway, so it won't be too bad. There's a little bit of blue kind of going around the back of this hoop here, so let's make sure that's coloured a bit blue, and this bit here as well. Where else have we got blue? Over here, might as well get it all covered. So then it's done. And yeah, that's all the blue, I think. All the blue that I can see anyway. Next, we are going to add a bit of shadow. I'm going to use Paynes grey because it's a bluey grey, a dark grey that's kind of got a bluey tone to it, which will be perfect. I might need more of a medium blue at some point, but obviously I will say if we get to that point. But first, let's just keep it nice and easy. Let's start with the shadow, the gap between the actual blue material and the buckle here. So I've got a nice sharp Paynes grey pencil, using plenty of pressure, getting a nice crisp line in between like so. It needs to be a little bit wider. There we go. And then just slightly decrease the pressure a little bit on the left hand side of it, just so you've got the impression of the material curving into that shadow. Then it's going to be dark in between the two sides of the collar as well. There we go. And just a little bit here, just to show that divide. And then just going to use it very gently from behind the ear, just to show a bit of shadow. Okay, going to go back over with the lighter blue again. Just fairly gently, and then I'm going to blend it out with the white because I don't want it to get too dark. I will add a bit of texture with the Paynes grey again in a moment. Just going in with the white with harder pressure, just so we've got a reasonably smooth area of light blue. I'm actually going to use the mauve a little bit. I know it's kind of a purpley blue, just very gently, just to add a bit more vibrancy to it. Just gentle pencil strokes, try and keep it consistent. Yeah, that's looking a bit better. Just going to match that up on the other side. Let's pop a little bit in this one as well. I know this bit over here isn't properly done, just so I don't forget. There we go. So I'm going to try and add a bit of texture now. I'm just going to start by adding a bit of shadow at the bottom, just so it gives a bit more structure. And I just like to add a bit more of the darkness at the bottom, just decreasing the pressure a little bit. Same at the top. Remember, we're going to use a slice tool shortly to get the hairs actually going over the top of the collar. And then we have got a bit of a pattern going on, so just nice and gently. In fact, I say gently because we've got quite a lot of layers. You will need a little bit of pressure to add lines, but just don't go too mad with it. You want them to still look quite delicate. So I'm doing vertical lines downwards. Don't worry if they don't hit like all the way to the edges of the collar, because bear in mind we're kind of zoomed out from the collar a bit, so it's just going to be subtle hints of a pattern. Okay, then it does kind of have more stitching going round. Just keep it quite rough. And I often find on collars, I never get it exact to the photo, but it's just kind of giving the idea of a material there. I'm just going to go back over with the ultramarine blue just to kind of blend it all back together again a little bit. Now let's add some more hairs, distract from the collar itself a little bit. Just have a bit of fun with this bit. Just make sure you dispose of the pencil dust as regularly as you can. And I'm going to try and add a bit more shadow actually coming out from behind the collar, so just doing the odd pencil stroke in the direction of the fur with Van-dyck brown. So I've almost let it all get a bit too pale around here. But again, I'm just aiming to draw the spaces between the light hairs. Okay, it's looking good to me. I'm just going to use a black pencil now, just to deepen this little shadow here. And also the one next to the buckle. And I would recommend just getting this hoop a bit clearer as well. So just so it's not as harsh as black, I'm going to use dark sepia here. Just redoing kind of the outline of this hoop. Just nice and gently keep it quite light. And at this stage on the metal, I like to use dark sepia to mark out the main dark parts on the shine. So have a look on the hoop itself, look out for any slightly darker sections. So it's going to be dark here right by the hairs. Decrease the pressure as you move away, keep it all quite light because it is silver. Then you'll see you've kind of got a line going down. This is where you need to try not to let your brain overthink it too much, just draw what you see. It's a little swoop of grey there. And it's darker underneath, kind of on these edges there. It's dark on this bit here and on the edge of there. Okay, that's going to give the impression of the shine. So at this point, get your white and kind of blend it in. You can always add a bit more after, a bit more darker colour. But I find most of the time just adding it with a darker grey or dark sepia gently and then blending it out mostly does the trick. But then you might find you just need to add a little bit of extra shadow to add a bit more contrast, like so. There we go, that'll do nicely. Now let's move on to the buckle. I'm going to go straight in with black because it's quite a dark section. Just remarking out the outlines and filling in the main dark shadows. Feel free just to use lighter pressure to begin with, we can always add more. But we're mainly just focusing on the main shadows and creases around here. And as we do this bit, we'll also get this blue, matching this bit of blue a bit better. I feel, before we continue that, I don't know about you, but I think these hairs look a bit harsh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen my white so it's not too thick. And then I'm going to kind of, it's just a bit of an experiment here. I'm going to try and go over them, see if it just softens them a little bit. Just a pencil stroke at a time. Just following along the bits that I sliced tooled in. Because I feel like the hairs look a bit too individual, they want to be more like a soft clump. I reckon that does look a bit better. I think that's, well, that's what I'm hoping anyway. So adding a hint of a whisker here as well. I don't know if you can actually see it on through the camera. I can see it in real life. There we go. Okay, back to the collar. So now I've marked out, well actually I haven't finished doing that, let's just finish this bit as well. Now that I've marked out the main sections, let's use some grey to start filling it in. So I'm using Warm Grey 3. It's very short, this pencil now. I need to buy some more grey POLYCHROMOS pencils. But just small circular motion, start getting some base layers in there. You'll notice if you've put some white down previously, again, you'll notice if the grey doesn't quite take to the paper as easily, if there's white underneath. Before we move on to any darker colours, I'm just going to add a few other tones into the black part of the buckle. So I think Earth Green from the POLYCHROMOS range is going to be perfect here. And we'll probably add a bit more light ultramarine. So I'm just going to carefully add a layer of each colour. I'm starting with the green, but I think in hindsight, I think the green's more obvious than the blue, so maybe I should have done blue first. We'll see what it looks like. I can always add a bit more afterwards. Okay, a little bit of blue. I mean, you can still see the green, so that's all right. And this is kind of the colour of the shine on this black bit here. So let's use dark sepia and start shading in the darker parts. So most of this bit's going to be quite dark, just small circular motions, making it a bit darker than it already is. Just keep an eye on the shiny bits where it's more pale. Feel free to do a gentle line where those bits are so you don't end up colouring them in by accident. And this is really going to make it 3D now, hopefully anyway. This is mainly kind of following the shape round is where the shine is. So again, just using a nice faint line just to avoid colouring in those shiny bits. Hopefully you can kind of see what I mean as I do it. Then we're going to start darkening this inner section. So starting with hard pressure right in the crease, gradually decreasing the pressure as we move away. And we're now going to use the dark sepia to help achieve a little bit more texture where the fur is almost overlapping the collar here. So it's already quite sharp. I'm going to do the thing again where I kind of draw the space between the hairs, just flicking it up, and we're drawing like the shadow that's peeking through. So make sure you follow the direction of the fur nice and carefully. I'm actually going to do some of it in black so that it's dark enough, so right by the collar here needs to be a little bit more crisp. Doing a little bit back this way as well. Just make it a bit darker. And I'm going to use the black to deepen some of the shadows further on the actual buckle here. I don't even know if buckle is quite the right term for this type of doing up device. But it's the first word that came to mind here. To make it a bit darker in here as well. And don't worry too much if it's not exact to the photo, as long as you're getting the main gist of the fur direction. Just remember, with long fur, if she shook her head or if the wind blew, it would all look a bit different anyway. And we need to make some of this front bit a bit darker. So just using the black nice and gently, well, kind of medium pressure now actually. I think it's kind of darker at the bottom and it gradually gets lighter as we move up, so just decrease the pressure a bit as you move to the top of the buckle. We'll do a bit of blending in a moment. We're going to add some of that shading to this part as well. So starting nice and dark, hard pressure right in the crease. It kind of goes all the way around the blue. And it's actually pretty much, actually there's a little bit of blue kind of in the background behind here. Just going to add that in now. Bit of blue, we'll add a little bit of mauve. And then some Paynes grey just to keep that bluey tone. It's just where some of the collar material is kind of around the back. And we'll go back to the black again. So just decreasing the pressure as you move away from the dark shadows. Again, it's quite dark at the bottom and it kind of gets lighter as you move away. And there's a bit of a shine on here as well, so leaving the shiny bit nice and pale. And I find that's kind of right next to where the join is here. It's going to make the shadow in between a bit better. There we go. And then the shadow's quite dark on the top, so more pressure there. Don't know why I felt the need to do a couple of darker lines between the hairs over there. It was just taunting me. Before we blend, I just want to try and get this blue right here. So blending it a bit with the white. It's more of a greeny blue, isn't it? I'm trying to think what actually made the colour like that. Maybe a bit more of this. No, it's still a lot more blue. Maybe it's the pattern, so let's use a bit of Paynes grey. Doing a couple of vertical lines, and because it's curved, it's kind of going through the buckle. The horizontal lines I'm going to do a bit more curvy. There we go. That will do the trick nicely. And I am going to blend with warm grey 1. Just going to sharpen it quickly. It's a bit too blunt for my liking. That's more like it, a bit more control now of where it's going. So I'm going to add a bit more pressure over the top of what we've done on the buckle and blend it together, getting rid of the grains of the paper. Again, if it gets too light anywhere, we can just go over it again with some black or dark sepia. And also just going to go over this bit of hair slightly as well, just make sure that's all blended. Lovely. Let's just grab the black and just go over any final shadows, including kind of behind the collar here. It does just need to be a bit darker between some of the hairs. And also within some of the shadows. Contrast is everything. That's what makes the drawings pop. And we'll just shade the bottoms of the black plastic again, just make them a bit darker. Try and keep it as smooth as possible, small circular motions. And the effect here of having it dark at the bottom and then it gradually getting lighter towards the top, it kind of really shows that matte shine. And that's a bit of a contrast there, like matte or shiny, they're kind of two different things, but this bit of plastic does kind of demonstrate both. It's a very subtle shine. And adding a bit more shadow around here, taking it easy, take your time. Add a little bit at a time. I'm just going to add a few like extra curvy black lines here just to keep the impression of the ear going around the collar. There we go. Just going to add a little tiny bit more black here, just want to make it a bit less shiny. There we go. And I'm just going to grab my size tool, just see if I can add any extra little wispy hairs, because I feel like the wispy hairs here are quite long. I might have gone a little bit overboard with them. But then actually if I add a few others elsewhere, that will kind of even it out slightly. Just the odd one. We go. Perfect. Before we move on, actually I do just want to darken a little bit of this blue patch. I'm going to use the Paynes grey again. There we go, because it's almost underneath the ear there. It doesn't want to be too light. And I'm going to do the same over here, adding that contrast. Perfect. So next section, we've got both this part of the collar where you've got the disc and the little hoop, but we've also got the black fur, and I think we'll kind of tackle both in one go. So let's start by adding base layers to the black fur here. Although before that I'm just going to lighten up some of this bit. This graphite pencil here marks out where we've got some white fur coming through. So it's important we can see it a little bit so we know where to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use warm grey 1 as my first base layer. Just going to get a nice consistent layer colouring in the shoulders, but I'm going to try and avoid the bits where we've got obvious white markings. I'll go over those with a white pencil shortly. Small circular motions, taking your time. I know we're on the home run now, we're on the last bit, but don't rush this last section of the drawing. It shouldn't take too much longer now. That's definitely a habit I've had to try and get myself out of. I do suddenly just get this frustrated feeling when I'm on the last stretch. I just think we're so close now, let's get it done, but just try and keep it as calm as you would be at the beginning stages. So you've got this far now, and we don't want to ruin it. So I've kind of coloured it in up to the white markings and kind of where the darker hairs would peek through between. And then I'm just going to colour it in on the other side as well. Right up to where the collar disc is. And as you can see with the tape, I've done this to, if I move it up a little bit, done this to get a nice kind of sharp line at the bottom. There's a couple of ways I like to have a drawing, either like this where it just finishes nice and straight, or more recently actually I've quite liked drawing it so that when you put the mount on the drawing, the body kind of comes out from behind the mount. But yeah, I haven't done it that way on this one, but yeah, either way it's quite neat. So because of that, you're not going to get the whole disc, but that's all right, that's just the way it's cropped. We want to allow space for quite a pale coloured ring here. I'm just going to rub out some of this graphite. And let's use this base layer to map out a nice white ring. So that's the outside of the circle, and then I'm just going to kind of draw a slightly smaller circle inside. And I'll colour that in. You probably won't be able to see it that clearly at the moment on your screen. And then where these hairs are marked out with the graphite, it's not really white fur, it's just lighter grey. So as long as we get plenty of paler colours underneath, that should come up quite nicely with the slice tool, kind of demonstrating the wispy flyaway hairs. So I'm not going to get too caught up on them at the moment, because of course we are going to use plenty of light greys and stuff to apply the early layers. Just colouring all the way to the edge of the shoulder. Just make sure you get underneath the ears as well. Make sure you've got a nice overlap so you haven't got just empty space. Now that we've fully got the first layer of grey down, we're going to start adding any other subtle tones that can be seen. So I'm going to start with blue. Again, keeping things nice and simple, light ultramarine, seeing as that's the light blue I've kind of been using throughout this. And as you're probably aware from what I've previously said in this tutorial, from doing the rest of the black fur, there is going to be quite a lot of blue showing through. So I'm going to pretty much cover the whole thing again with blue, except for where the white fur is. And again, don't be worried if it looks a bit too blue at the moment. We've got plenty more layers to go. It is going to be toned down, so don't panic too much if it looks a bit odd at this stage. Got to push through the ugly stages. So I'm approaching where the white fur will be now, so I'm just going to be nice and careful as I draw towards that bit. I'm kind of filling the spaces between the white hair. The next thing I do before I add any further colours after the blue, I'll probably fill in this bit with white pencil just so we've got those base layers down. I'll fill in this bit up here as well. And then just pretty much colouring in the rest of this section of fur. But again, just being careful of this ring that we've kind of made space for. Although as long as you're nice and careful around here, the more layers we add, the more clear it's going to become. Okay, now that's done. Before I forget, I'm just going to pretty much cover the whole section that's got white fur with a white pencil, because now if we go over it with other colours, I'll be able to use the slice tool to reveal the white hairs. And around here, there are, as I mentioned a bit earlier, they're not white, but they're quite pale. So I'm just going to blend things together a little bit around here. So we've got a nice substantial layer of pale colours for if I want to use a slice tool here to add some texture and detail. Lovely, that will do. Now for some more colours. Earth green I think is essential. Can't really see a lot of green on this side, maybe just a tiny bit on the edge. It's more on the other side. But yeah, just a tiny bit there. Then we're going to add some more to this section. Just a little tiny bit around near the collar, I think. There we go. That's all good. Now I was having a little bit more of a look at what colours I can see. There are some slightly pink tones, so I'm going to use brownish orange. I still can't get over the fact that that's what it's called, because it's not orange at all. It's definitely more of a dull pink. But just nice and gently applying a little bit here and there. Mostly on this shoulder here. We'll get some up by the collar as well. Again, just careful of this hoop. Take advantage of these slightly darker colours now to get this marked out nice and clearly. A little bit down in this corner as well. We want it to look a bit more like purpley blue, so I'm going to go in with the mauve now and use that to kind of fill in the darker sections, and then we'll have a little bit of a blending spray after that. I'm still mostly trying to just work between the white hairs here, but we can be a bit more relaxed about it now that we know that we've got a nice white layer underneath. It's beautifully deep blue down this bit, so plenty of this colour around there. feel like there's not really a lot to say at this point. As I said, just circular motions, keep it consistent, filling in the darkest parts. Just going to make sure I've got plenty of overlap with the ear hairs here. It is quite a pale section around here, so I'm not going to get too much more. Okay, that'll do for now. Now we'll do some blending. I'm going to do that with the first grey that I used, so warm grey 1. So we're going to add some more pressure, just smooth out what we've done so far, including kind of go over the tips of the ears as well, so we can get that nice and blended. And this is a good opportunity to get a bit of grey where these white hairs are. Just kind of soften the transition, because it's not like a completely white. There is of course some grey in there where there's shadow. So getting some on top of it now. Yeah, as you can see, it's just softening it in, making it a bit more natural. Continuing the blending even between little bits, so around the collar. Oh, moving my drawing board there. And if you have decided to do the tape thing at the bottom like I have, just make sure the colour pencil's getting right up to it so that you've got a nice straight line when you remove it. Almost there with this blending. It's definitely at its not the most beautiful stage at the moment, but that is okay. Trust the process. Right, that's kind of the first blend done. That's all good. Next step, we're going to start going in with the darker colours such as Paynes grey, dark sepia, black. They're just a few potentials, and we'll start actually getting the sections of long fur in there, get the shadows nice and deep, and that should take us to the end of the fur there. And then of course that other bit of collar. Time to go in with our darker colours now to mark out the main sections of long fur, and just to get those shadows in there. But I kind of want to keep a fairly blue vibe going on, so I'm going to start by using Paynes grey. It won't surprise me if we go back in with a lighter blue again shortly to blend these later layers together, but we'll take it as it comes. We'll see how things get on. So my pencil's nice and sharp, and I'm just going to start doing more individual pencil strokes. I'm actually going to start trying to create the hairs themselves, and I'm just looking at the reference photo, making sure I'm following the main directions of the fur. Now any sections that the fur is much lighter, I'll let the lighter layers underneath kind of peek through. And I'll try and keep it as accurate as possible to the photo, but as I've said multiple times throughout this tutorial, bear in mind long fur could be in a different position based on any movement from the animal. So as long as it's kind of generally in the right sort of place and you're kind of showing the overall characteristics as they should be, then that's okay. It doesn't matter if not every single hair is in the right place. I don't know why I started going up here, but I'll go back to that bit in a moment. So looking at the photo, it's quite dark right on the edge here, then it goes a little bit lighter across here, and then nice and dark next to the white hairs. So I'm going to just use lighter pressure as I go over the lighter part, allowing those lighter layers to show through. We can always use the slice tool a bit later, again, to bring out some extra highlights, some extra wispy hairs. And the hairs in general, they're kind of all kind of going diagonally in a bit of a curve like that towards the white hairs. So about here is where it starts to darken. So I'm just going to do individual pencil strokes again, kind of flicking the strokes back towards the lighter part. Of course, I'm using harder pressure now to make sure that it's looking darker. Now at this point, feel free to draw on the tape if you have tape to the bottom like I have. That's going to help you get that nice crisp straight line at the bottom when you peel it off. Or if you've decided to do it without, if you want to go for more of like a fading out bottom, then just decrease your pressure as you get a bit closer. But yeah, very individual process there. Do what you want to do with it. Okay, so I just want to make sure we're keeping the wavy shape of the fur as we go kind of between the white hairs. So I'm actually going to draw a few lines from between, well, kind of going across the section of white hairs here. It kind of goes along and then sweeps down. I'm going to do some kind of going backwards, get back into the white hairs, just so I get some softer. I find if I start the pencil stroke in the white hair and then go out, it's a bit blunt at the end, whereas if you flick it in, slightly softer transition. And it's going to be quite a contrast eventually. The hair is very dark right next to the white fur, but still just build it up nice and gradually. Don't want to go too mad with it straight away. Then we'll work our way back up towards the top here. And we'll work right up into the collar and behind the ears. Still, I'm going with individual pencil strokes here, just getting that texture in there. Just be nice and careful next to the collar. Just try and make sure you're starting the pencil strokes right at the crease of the collar and working your way out. There we go, that's looking good. I think I'm just going to work on a section at a time actually, just break it down a little bit. So that's that little bit done. But we'll do a little bit of blending before our next dark layer. So I'm going to go back in with the light ultramarine, just to add some more blueness to it. I'm sticking to the direction of the fur, but pretty much going over what I've just done with harder pressure. Just be careful not to get too much into the white section. This will just help smoothen it out before we add more layers, but also make the blue more vibrant. Lovely, and I'm going to blend a little bit more with the warm grey one. With this bit, I don't mind if it goes a little bit into the white because it's a more natural colour. Okay, lovely. I'm just going to add a little bit more brownish orange. I could do with a little bit more of a pink tone down the left hand side. So again, just doing some individual pencil strokes again. Kind of medium to hard pressure here, just to get a bit more of that in there. I kind of want it right on the edge, so I might do some gentle back and forth strokes here just so I can keep the pencil under control while I add some to the edge. Okay, so we're going to be adding some more dark colours now. As we got quite a lot of darkness down with the Paynes grey, I'm actually going to skip using dark sepia. I think dark sepia actually looks a little bit warm for this section. So I'm going to go straight in with the black actually. So nice and sharp, very similar technique to what we did with the Paynes grey a moment ago, but just being a little bit more careful and building it up a bit more gradually, because of course the black is very dark, it's quite harsh. So just take it easy. I'm starting off with the edge of the shoulder here, and I'm starting my pencil stroke right on the edge and flicking it in, just because I want to have the control of where it goes. I don't want it to be scribbling outside of the shoulder too much. Even though she's got long hair, it does all seem to sit quite smoothly over the shoulder. And then as I flick the pencil stroke in towards this lighter section here where it's got a bit of shine, just decreasing the pressure. And I'm going to do a few little strokes over the lighter bit, mostly quite gentle, but maybe like the odd harder one, just to show a bit of separation between clumps of fur. Adds a bit of extra texture. And then we'll continue towards the white hairs over here. Again, just really focus on the shape of the fur, the little curve that happens by the white fur. And it does get quite dark in between, so I am just using a bit more pressure with a few of the pencil strokes here, just to get a nice contrast between the black fur and the white fur. Some of the black hair does actually go like all the way through like this, just a little bit though. And then it's kind of more of a solid white up at the top. So we won't make the pencil strokes go all the way through on this bit. And then lovely and dark at the top here. I'm using quite hard pressure on these pencil strokes just to get that contrast in. I'm allowing the odd bit of blue to show through, just so we've got that texture. I'm actually going to almost colour it in a bit in small circular motions right next to the collar, just so that it's nice and dark coming out of there. And then go back to doing the pencil strokes, moving away. It is also very dark right next to the ear, so I'm going to do a little bit of back and forth motions with the pencil alongside kind of this main clump of fur coming down in the ear. But then just going back to individual pencil strokes again as I move away. And we're back to the white hairs a little bit here, so just taking your time as you draw alongside. And I do need the darkness to kind of come down to the left a little bit more. I'm going to try and get the darkness to peek out again from between the ear hairs a bit more. Keeping the pressure quite hard. And that is starting to reach the level of darkness that I want now. But we need another blend. I'm going to go back in with the blue, I think, to blend. On my one you can see how it's a bit grainy still by the ear especially. So I'm going to kind of go just back and forth over it. As we've got quite a lot of layers done now, yes, you still need to do a bit of pressure to blend it, but you'll find it kind of blends a bit more effortlessly. Just letting it merge together. And then I'm going to go back in with the black again and reapply where it needs to be a bit darker again, which I think it does need to be darker near the white bits again. Just doing a few more little black pencil strokes through the white just to give it a bit more texture. We will focus on increasing the realism of this white fur quite soon. And I'm still just continuing how I was previously, fairly hard pressure on the pencil, individual pencil strokes, following the direction of the fur, until I'm satisfied with how dark each section is. I'm going to put a little bit more on the edge. Okay, so I think it's now time to do a little bit with the slice tool. I just want to do a little bit of texture, extra texture kind of around this light section. So just going to do a few little wisps. Following like the main general direction, but going off course a little bit just to give it a bit more of a natural look. And I might also just go along a couple of the ends of the ear hairs just to make sure they can be seen over the top. Just a little bit though, because I don't want them to look too light. As you can see, I've just popped it along there. I do just want to darken that highlight a little bit though. That's got a little bit light for me. So I'm going to go in with this warm grey 3 and just colour over the top of it. In fact, I'm going to add even a little bit of Paynes grey to that. There we go, makes it a little bit more natural. Okay, so now time to make the white hairs a little bit more wispy as well. So kind of starting from the white patch, scraping outwards, just adding some extra hairs, extra texture. And because of the white pencil we applied underneath, that should all reveal itself quite nicely. There are a few little wispy hairs kind of near the collar as well, so take advantage of that. And again, just have fun with it. Don't get too caught up on it looking exactly like the photo. I'd rather kind of get the spirit and the movement. Lovely, that will do nicely on that bit. I am just going to use this warm grey 1 just to blend out a little bit some of the darker parts where I put a bit of black pencil on there. Just kind of using some back and forth motions with medium pressure, just soften it a little bit. There we go, it looks a bit better. There is a little bit of a splodge there, but I'll just pop over that with the slice tool. I think that's made it disappear. That looks a bit better to me. There we go. Just going to add a couple of little black pencil strokes in between just to reapply some of the contrast, keeping it all nice and crisp. Okay, I think that will do nicely. So we're going to move across now to the next section and we'll do like the rest of the collar here as we go. So we'll go back to applying Paynes grey to start adding the darkness. Again, we're going to follow the directions of the first. If we start kind of to the left of the hoopy bit of the collar, the fur kind of swoops out into the white fur here. Keeping the pressure quite hard, just make sure you don't go into the hoop we've already drawn, and also we want to keep the empty space ready for that hoop there. So if you need to go back to doing a bit of kind of back and forth colouring in motion in some parts to keep the control, that is all good. And I'm going to kind of do that as I go around here. I'm going to draw the outline, colour away a little bit, and then go back into the swoopy pencil strokes. And as we work down, rather than going off to the left, the hairs kind of start going more downwards, kind of in that direction. So we'll kind of start working that in there. And you may notice that the white hairs I've done, they definitely look a little bit longer than in the reference. And in fact, I just want to add a few more wisps at the top here. Now what you do at this point is up to you. If you want to shorten them, you can kind of add some more black pencil strokes in there. Or if you're kind of content with how it is, just leave it as it is. And I think as it stands, I might just leave it. If it doesn't look quite right once I've finished, then I will tackle it. But if I'm happy with it, then might as well leave it. So just continuing these motions with the pencil. And with the tape, I find it easier rather than to kind of draw into it and the pencil gets stuck. I kind of find it easier to start on the tape and go backwards. And I'm just going to colour in around the disc here on the collar. And as I move away, back to some pencil strokes, but not too many because we want some of the blue to be peeking through here. Okay, so I'm next going to colour in like the inside of the hoop here. It's quite a solid dark area, so I'm not going to worry too much about texture. I'm just going to try and keep it nice and smooth and consistent. While colouring this in, I've noticed that kind of the hoop I've outlined here kind of disjoins slightly, so I just need to try and almost recover that. Hopefully it will all kind of go to plan once I fill that in a bit better. Let's leave it for the moment, we won't overcomplicate it. Now we're going to go kind of inside this hoop here, so I'm going to start off with just continuing the outline, just make sure it's nice and crisp. And just pay attention to any shapes around here. To be fair, it does kind of stay quite a smooth circle as we go around this bit. And then once I've kind of coloured in right by it, I'm going to go back to doing the pencil strokes here just to get the texture, because it can be seen between this bit. It kind of goes mostly straight down, but then just curves around to the left slightly. If you're worried about it, the pencil getting onto the empty space where the hoop will be, start your pencil stroke right next to it and then go into the circle instead. Lovely, that'll do for now. And then we'll do the same around the other side. Just colouring it in initially, make sure everything is in position. And the disc kind of goes into the fur, so some of the hairs almost look like they're overlapping it a little bit at the bottom, which should become a bit clearer as we continue with the layers here. And we can go back to the individual pencil strokes again quite safely. Now it's along here where you can see some lighter parts. We'll try and keep some of the lighter layers showing through at an early stage, but I am going to be relying on my slice tool again later on, just so we can get those more natural flyaway hairs. So just follow kind of the main direction of the fur. It's especially the little scruffy bit just to the right of the collar here, where you've got one bit coming down and another bit coming across. I think I will just use the slice tool for that bit. It's going to make our lives a lot easier. We've got plenty of light layers underneath, so it will work. And I think I will kind of stop here, get this whole section done before moving on to the rest. So it's finishing off some of the pencil strokes along here. That will do nicely. So a little bit more blending. I'm going to go over with the light ultramarine. Just make sure everything is nice and smooth. A little bit grainy here, so especially make use of it along this bit. And we'll do a little bit more blending again with warm grey 1. Now we're going to go in with the black like we did a little bit earlier. And actually I think as we get some of the black hairs going into the white hairs to the left, it will start to look a little bit more in proportion with the darker roots. So a little bit harder pressure, just flicking the pencil strokes in, trying to keep it nice and soft and natural. Adding a little bit of variety to the pressure, like do some a little bit more gently, some a bit harder. Just because in reality hairs aren't all entirely uniform. And as we kind of come down here, I'm just going to do a few and allow the lighter colours to show through a bit. Just being nice and careful next to the collar. And just to keep it nice and crisp and detailed, and just making sure the black goes right up to it. And it's a bit harsh here between the white and the hoop and on the collar, so I'm just going to do some slightly more gentle black just to soften that shadow slightly. There we go. Now for the inside of the hoop, slightly harder pressure, keeping it nice and crisp. And then inside this hoop here. So at first I'm actually just going to do some of the individual strokes just so I can see where the darker strands want to be. Just a few, because I don't want it to be too dark. I do want to see a few highlights peeking through. That's fine, but then just going to colour the black a little bit more next to some parts of the hoop itself. Again, just keeping the shape nice and crisp. Perfect. And then through to the next bit, it's actually very dark right next to it, so I'm just going to focus on colouring it in initially, so we've got that nice dark black. In fact, I'll colour it in all the way up to the collar. Her hair is darker than the black on this buckle here, so just make sure you've got plenty of pressure without damaging the paper, of course. Once we've done right next to it, we'll start to get back into the appropriate texture. And just so we don't have any harsh transitions, I'm just going to continue the colouring in motion, but gradually decrease the pressure as I move away. Then we can add some of the more individual textured pencil strokes over the top. Otherwise you'll see that hard block of black underneath. Okay, that'll do. Individual pencil strokes, getting that texture in there. If you're getting a sore wrist at this point, probably means you're doing it right. Using slightly lighter pressure here, just because of course overall the hairs are quite a bit lighter. Gonna work back down near the collar now, as in the disc of the collar. Working from the bottom, flicking the pencil strokes up. Just following the gentle curve of the fur. And it's going to be a nice dark shadow right next to the edge here. Just right in that corner, and then flicking the pencil strokes away from it again. I do want some of it to be a bit darker inside this hoop actually. So just nice and carefully increasing the darkness here. Next step I am going to do is add a little bit more blending to what we have just done. I am going to do that with the light ultramarine again. Just going over anywhere that looks a bit grainy, doesn't look quite as smooth as it could be, nice and carefully. Kind of going in mainly back and forth motions here with harder pressure. And then we'll go back in with the black where we need to just redarken it. Now the paper's probably got as much layers as it can take now pretty much, so just be careful with it. But equally, because there are so many layers, the black pencil should go down quite softly now. Just want to add a few extra dark strands in here just to add a bit of texture, some contrast in this section. Almost giving more impressions of little clumps of fur rather than just one solid mass. Same in here. It is a bit harder to do it within the hoop here, but just try your best. You kind of want it to look the same as what's outside the hoop. Okay, that'll do nicely for now. Now I want to start getting the collar itself done. So I'm going to start off with my fairly sharp white pencil here and just gently, I'm hoping I can revive this little bit. colour over the hoop that we've drawn out here. Might need to reapply a few shadows here and there. Okay, so we have got an entire ring now. It's looking a bit better at the top, but does just need to be neatened up in a couple of places. So I'm going to use the Paynes grey, neaten up this shadow here, and same in here. But I also want to blend that bit out a little bit more, so again just colouring in this bit with the white pencil. And I'm going to use the Paynes grey just to crispen up some parts of the hoop passing through the other hoop. Re-darken any shadows where required, because after all it is shiny, it's not just one solid white hoop. I'm going to use a little bit of black here because this bit wants to be a bit even more dark. There we go. And if anything looks a bit grainy, again just blend it out with the white pencil. Okay, I'm just taking a moment just to look at it. I think there's a bit of a lump on this bit here, just going to go in a bit further with the black. It wants to be as smooth and as perfect a circle as possible. I think just making it a bit darker and crisper in here is going to help. Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. Let's get the actual disc done and see how it looks after that. I'm hoping I can just use the colours I've already been using in this drawing so far. But let's start with, what colour is this? Brown Ochre from the POLYCHROMOS, just to get quite a nice goldeny coloured base. I'm not going to worry about the blurry writing. Just going to mainly aim for the shine and the shape. And it kind of loops over the top of the hoop there. Okay, just so we can get a nice thick base layer. Going to go over that with a bit more pressure with the Ivory from the POLYCHROMOS, because we will need a nice light bit kind of around the edge here where it's shiny. Next, I am going to use burnt sienna from the POLYCHROMOS. I'm going to kind of mark out an inner circle here, leaving behind the shiny edge. I'm going to do small circular motions. The aim here is to keep things as smooth and consistent as possible. Looks a bit rough and uneven at the moment, but hopefully as we get some more layers in there, it will look a bit better. If you look at the reference, it does actually go quite dark, especially right in here where it tucks into the hair and just here. So I'm going to use Van-dyck brown now. At first, just alongside where the shine is going to be. Small circular motions, and this darkness kind of carries around the whole circle. And if you're anything like me when it comes to this sort of thing and colours, just think once we've done this bit, we're on the home run with this easy bit of fur. The end is almost in sight. Very, very exciting. Just want to make sure I don't lose the attention of this bit that hooks over the top. There's probably a little crease there. Just basically make sure it's still visible. And make sure it stays like a nice crisp circle on this hoop here. We're going to make some bits a little bit darker, so let's use dark sepia, especially as we go right into the hairs. It should start to look a bit better now, as we can now see the shadows are helping us envision the positioning of this disc. It looked a bit off before with the proportions because it's going back into our fur. I'm just going to grab the black pencil. I don't know if you can see on mine here. I just need to fill in a little bit of the shadow there. That's better. I'm just going to very gently use this dark sepia around some other bits near the shine. And I'm also going to use the black here just to crispen the outside. Getting there. Now we need to do a little bit of blending. I'm going to go back in with, where is it? Brown ochre. First colour I used on the disc. I'm just using harder pressure. Sorry if you see the camera shaking here. Blending it all together. Should make it a bit smoother again. I'm going to go back over with some other colours, so burnt sienna, just increase the richness of some of the red tones in here. Add a little bit to the bit that goes over the top of the hoop. And some more Van-dyck brown. Just re-crispening some of those shadows and just evening out any bits that look a bit rough. I'm just going to use a little bit of black here just to add a bit to the hole where it loops around the hoop. And this shiny bit could do with a little bit more redness to it, so I'm going to add a bit of the burnt sienna, just a little bit. And to me, it looks like some bits could still do with being a bit smoother. I'm going to try going in with a bit of ivory, see how it goes. It's nice and gently to begin with. To be fair, it looks smoother in real life than it does through the camera. I do find this camera, it does pick up, it kind of exaggerates contrast a little bit. A little bit more burnt sienna, just play around with it a little bit, but if you find that you've added a lot of layers and you don't want to push it too far, just, yeah, kind of stop when it feels sensible. Let's go with a little bit more dark sepia, increase the shadow here. Okay, so I do just want to perfect some bits around the hoop. It's looking a bit unrealistic to me. Just perfect any bits of the circle that look a bit bumpy. And I think I'm going to try and make some bits look a little less white. I'm actually just going to use my black and just gently add a few little pencil marks on the way around. There we go. And just looking at this disc a little bit, I think we just need to darken the shadow a bit at the bottom. Lovely. To be fair, for me and collars, I'm pleased with that. I'm afraid I probably won't ever be doing a tutorial that is just a collar because it is definitely my weak spot. But hopefully what I've shown you through there has made sense. And you've got a half decent collar out of it. But that is definitely something that I want to improve in the future, is accessories like collars and stuff. To be fair, it is quite tricky on a drawing of this size, I guess. This is a small drawing. We'll use that as the excuse. But it just goes to show you're always going to have things that you want to strive to improve on. So we'll leave that for the moment. If there's anything kind of screaming out at me that needs to be improved with this collar, then we'll deal with that as it comes. In fact, I still can't quite leave it alone. I just want to pop a little bit of white pencil on there. Smooth it out a bit. Okay, let's leave that for now. Leave it. And let's finish this bar on the right hand side. So Paynes grey, get some blue tones in there. This should be a nice part of the drawing. So I'm going to be working with texture, directions of the fur. Kind of got a tuft that goes out that way. And just try and enjoy this last bit. Enjoy it, don't rush. Take it easy. And just let the last bits come to life. Now bear in mind the shadow up in this bit right by the collar is very dark, but we'll kind of just use the black pencil to tackle that shortly. Just focus on fur directions for now and kind of other shadows. It's also darker kind of here, and this clump of hair kind of works its way out. So you may notice we have got some of the ear hairs coming down. They do actually look quite pale. I think I actually want to, oh, just dropped my pencils on the floor. Just want to darken some of those up a little bit, because on this side, I'd say the ear hairs are darker than the hairs on the on the shoulders. So yeah, we'll just darken them up slightly just so we don't lose track of them. Can always add more on top a bit later if we need to. There we go. So yeah, I just did that with my black pencil, and then I'm just going to continue, and then that way when I just add some of the Paynes grey on top, I can still kind of see where those ear hairs were. And it's all quite pale down this side of the shoulder actually, so we shouldn't have to work too hard with getting lots of dark black layers down. But this Paynes grey ultimately is responsible for getting the texture right in that case, because we're not going to be having those darker layers later to finish it off. Let's make it a bit darker at the bottom here. Okay, let's have a little blend. Same as before, we'll do it with the light ultramarine. Mainly following the direction. If you want to do a bit of back and forth, that's fine. And just make sure it's well blended right into the ear hairs as well. As I said, we can reapply some of those hairs a bit later if we need to, so don't worry if they disappear a little bit. Let's do a little bit more with the warm grey one, just to make sure it's all really nice and smooth. And because the tones are a little bit warmer on this side, I might actually use a little bit of dark sepia to get some of the darker tones, because black's almost a little bit harsh for some of it on this side. But let's just do our black bits first. As you can see on the reference, it's extremely dark shadow under here, so we'll kind of go with the colouring in technique initially, like we did on this part here, starting with nice firm pressure directly under the buckle. And that firm pressure is actually going to carry through to under the ears, and this is where again the slice tool could help us out a bit later, just to get some of those wispy ear hairs coming out from the shadows. Circular motions, try and keep it as smooth as possible, smooth and consistent, take it easy. As I move away, I'm now starting to gradually decrease the pressure on the pencil. Okay, as we're moving away from that shadow, we can start to use some of the black to create some texture. As I said, we're not going to use as much black over here, but while it's still quite dark on this section, the black is ideal. And And just pay attention to where you've kind of got darker shadows between the clumps. I reckon it's going to be extremely satisfying when we remove this tape. Hopefully, as always, it'll be a nice crisp straight line at the bottom. Okay, so these lines here are a bit more important because we're making a transition from this dark shadow out to kind of the normal hairs, so you will need a few kind of harder strokes coming out, but then it kind of wants to soften as you move away. Remember, we're going to be doing some slice tool over this bit anyway, so if there are any slightly scruffy bits, don't worry about it. Now, I hate to do this to you, but this is annoying me every time I look at it. So I want to do something about it. I've kind of made too much hair there. I'm just going to sharpen my Paynes grey, because I think that's the one that's going to help me save it. Because you've got the blue, the bluey tone, but it's nice and dark. Basically, I'm just going to gently do lines between the hairs. Try and just bring the hairs up a little bit. Make them a bit less obvious. Add a little bit of ultramarine. I reckon that's helped already. I don't think I'm ever going to be in love with this bit, but I think that has helped already. So let's get back to the task in hand. Ignore that bit, we're done with the collar. No more getting sidetracked by the collar. Okay, so look at the reference a bit darker here. I'm actually going to switch to dark sepia now because it's got a slightly warmer tone to it, slightly browny colour. And I'll use it quite gently, just trying to get a nice soft finish. And the hairs are going to kind of flick out a little bit, out to the right hand side. Okay, I don't want to make it any darker than that. I'm going to do some blending with Warm Grey 1. Just smooth out anything that looks a bit grainy still. Okay, and just re-darken a couple of bits with the dark sepia. And because a lot of detail is going to happen with the slice tool here, I'm kind of being quite flexible and lenient with what I'm doing here. And it is looking a little on the dark side, but of course the slice tool is going to bring out extra light hairs again. Okay, so before we do the slice tool, I'm just going to grab my black pencil again, just make sure I'm happy with what kind of darker ear hairs are coming down, make sure they're visible. Just make that shadow a bit deeper in there. Okay, let's do this. Time to slice tool. I'm going to start with any final wispy ear hairs. So I've got this curve coming down. I'm just going to kind of finish that curve off. A couple of similar ones along here. There's kind of some that come over the collar. And then we've got other wispy hairs coming out from under the collar here. Then we've got the big wispy clump that kind of goes down this way. And yeah, just be gentle with it. This is our final details now. This kind of goes back on itself. I almost want to add a bit more on this side as well, just to even it out. And there's not really a lot I can describe here, to be honest. If you're doing the same as me, using a slice tool, just take your time. Don't rush it. And just have fun with it. A little bit of trial and error. If you do any that you don't like the look of, you can colour back over it within reason. I think we want a few extra bits coming out from here. Right, final details on the ears here. And are there any along this bit that we want? Okay. Don't want to overdo it. There's a few more along this bit, a bit more wispy. Going to grab my soft brush, just make sure I've got rid of all of the pencil dust. I'm just going to sit back for a minute, have a look, and you know what, I can already spot something I want to add a bit more of. I want a bit more shadow here, so I'm just going to go in with my black pencil. Nothing major, just a little bit more depth there. going to make some of these ear hairs here a bit crisper. Overall, try not to get too caught up on this last bit where we add final details, because you'll drive yourself mad. You'll just keep looking and looking, you'll keep noticing things. It's just best to reach a point where you're like, yeah, that's fine, we're good, we're happy, and leave it be. Just going to add a few more dark hairs here. I have noticed on mine, because this has been such a long work in progress. I mean, I started this in May, I think. It's now November. It has been sitting for a while, so I feel that some of the bits I've done ages ago have almost lost a bit of their contrast. Sometimes that happens, especially on this watercolour paper. Sometimes some of the paper grain can come back through. I mean, it's all very minor. I'm not going to go back and go over all of it. I'm still happy with how it looks. But in my eyes, it almost looks a bit more vibrant down here, the stuff that I've done more recently. But maybe I'm just imagining it. You never know. A bit more darkness on the ear down here. And when you're kind of happy and you're done, just make sure you're happy with how clean the paper is. Use a kneadable eraser if you need to. And I am going to go, I'm not going to do it on the video, I'm going to remove this tape. Now, a few tips here. It depends on the tape you use. You can get tape that just peels away very easily, no stress. The tape I've got, it's fine on some papers, but it can be a bit too sticky for this watercolour paper. So if you have any concerns or you think it's not going to peel away successfully, use a hairdryer if you've got one and kind of blow the hairdryer on it. It will melt the glue. Obviously do it on the hot setting. Melt the glue and it will peel off extremely easily. So I'm actually going to go and do that because I don't want to risk anything after all this time. Just tidying up a few little bits here. But yeah, I'm going to go and do that. At the end of this video, I'll reveal how it looks at the end. But I hope you're all happy with how yours has turned out. I look forward to seeing the outcomes. And as always, any questions, comment on this video or drop me a message and I will try and help you out. But yeah, I'm very happy that this is finally finished. And here she is, all finished, signed, mounted. Overall, very, very pleased with her. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and hopefully I'll be back with another one in the future.